this show, we pick pieces of pop culture that were important to us in a given year. We then discuss memories and dig into those movies, albums, shows, and more. I'm Brad.
And I'm Giff.
All right, how you doing tonight, Giff?
I am doing great. Not a lot of elbow room in here tonight. So I'm excited, though. I'm excited that we have just a fun-filled room for this episode. You've invited, I believe, not only some great people for this episode, but some wonderful listeners and supporters to this podcast.
True.
And with that, I'll let you introduce who we have on tonight.
So Pete is still not with us, still in limbo, but we have a jam-packed studio here tonight with some of our best listeners and musical experts, because this is all about music. And when I was making all my notes for tonight, there's about 10 times where I wrote down the name Craig. So I'm going to start with him. So Craig is here. You might remember him from our Joshua Tree episode about 2 years ago, and then he played a game with us once too. Introduce yourself, Craig, and we'll share your memory of 1996 first. Let's just go that way. So this is all about 1996.
All right. Well, hello. Thanks for having me. And 1996 was kind of a big year for me. I got married in 1996.
Oh, I didn't know that.
To somebody else on this episode. We'll let you figure that out. But we also bought a house in 1996. So it was our first house. We got married. It was a year of a lot of change, a whole lot of change. And actually, I think it was all for the better. Really started us on a great trajectory, and we listened to a lot of great music that was released in 96 and started our life together.
All right. And Craig, so he worked at Best Buy. We're not supposed to maybe say names, but he worked at a giant music retailer at this time.
With a yellow price tag.
He had his on the pulse of music, and was involved in lots of things. To break this thing up, I'm going to go to our guest in the lower right next, for me at least. That's Brian Rappy, my coworker, who has been on the show many times. He was our first 5-timer. Mm-hmm. I see you're wearing your 5-timer sweater tonight.
Yes, I am. It's very comfortable. Thank you.
So, Brian, you've been on Swingers and The Office Space and The Big Lebowski and a couple of those games too. Mm-hmm. What do you remember about 96? You usually have a funny story to tell us.
Yeah, 96 was a big year for me. That's when I started as an educational assistant at the school we work at together. So that was my first school year. And that summer, I decided, I thought I was being smart, and I was an educational assistant helping out in a summer school class from like 8 to noon. And then I would drive down to Jordan, Minnesota, and work in a metal fabrication factory from 2 to midnight. Then from there, drive back to Cottage Grove, which is probably about an hour 20-minute drive, and then started all over again the next day at 8 a.m. But what I was excited about, it was only, both jobs were only 4 days a week, so I'd have a 3-day weekend. What I didn't count on how tired I'd be on Friday. And it didn't matter that I wasn't working because I couldn't do anything. So, but listening to these albums brought back so many memories, and how exciting 96 was, and just the music, the movies. Listen to you guys, as of right now, the latest show, listen to the different movies you guys listed off was amazing. Just brought back just hanging out with friends. I did a lot of, on Saturdays, I would bartend house parties. So I was going all over the cities, bartending different places, and just having a blast. And as of right now, missing that energy of 96. I wish I had the energy to do all that again.
How do you get into the house party bartending pipeline?
Basically, it's word of mouth, and you bartend one house party, and then other people will say, "Hey, who was that guy bartending? Can you get them to come here?" And then I would get a phone call, or back then, let me take that back. I'd get, my pager would go off, and I had a pager with a little screen on it, and it would be address 911, be here by 7. So
Excellent.
that's how I would get invited to house parties.
I
to
thought
bartend.
maybe you printed off like coasters, like little beer coasters, and would pass them out and all this stuff, and then people would take them and with your name.
He
on
hung
it.
those things on the wall where you cut the little strips at the bottom of the paper.
Oh yeah, that would work too. Yeah.
And so when you do that, they supply everything. You just show up and you just start working. Is that how that goes?
Yeah. Yep,
Just
I'd
do
hop
your
behind
best-
the bar.
Your best
yeah,
Tom Cruise impersonation.
Yeah. I didn't have much flair, but I do remember my specialty drink was called the hand grenade, which was a shot of Bailey's, shot of Kahlua, shot of Rumpelmann, shot of 151, all in one drink. You shoot it down, and 10 seconds later, it'd go off like a hand grenade.
Well, lovely.
Nice. He always
No,
has
and nobody dies. So
Okay.
that was the belt. Like I look back at that now, it's like, oh yeah, no, we should have been killing people with that.
Yeah.
I
that's
don't
a
like
rough-
shots, but he introduced me a couple years ago to the pancake breakfast, which is the best shot I've ever had, and that was great.
Is maple syrup part of that shot?
No, but it
or-
tastes like pancakes once the
Yeah.
aftertaste after you're done, and it's amazing. It tastes just like it.
Wow.
So it's a shot of Jameson, half shot of orange juice, half shot of butterscotch schnapps. Mix them all together, shoot them, and it tastes like a pancake breakfast.
Wow.
There you go. It's cool.
Wow.
Highly recommend it.
All right, so we have 3 guests tonight, and so we split up the couple just to break things up here. But Danica is back. Danica's my sister, and she's been on just twice too, right? She did the Freaks and Geeks episode with us, a great one, and then also played one of our games one time with Craig too. So Danica, introduce yourself, and what do you remember of '96 besides just getting married, maybe?
Besides the biggest
Or
part
maybe
of
you-
your- of
maybe
that-
you
of
have-
the year.
Different memories of the wedding.
Yeah, hi, I'm Danica. Thanks for having me back. It's kind of fun to do and revisit things from such a big year in our life. When Craig said he was married to somebody else on the podcast and he didn't reveal it, what came to mind, Brad, was that maybe it would have been you, because do you remember your famous thing that you said?
That if you didn't marry him, I would.
Yes. Brad was so enamored with
I don't
my-
remember saying that, but I've heard it a couple of times enough that I know that apparently that's the legend.
Yes, that's the legend, that Brad and Craig had so much in common, and Brad just was very happy to welcome into the family. But I was the one that did end up marrying him. And yes, we moved into our house that day or that year. The one thing I remember about our wedding is how hot it was, and it didn't,
Yes.
the air conditioning in the limousine did not work. And the limousine driver tried to convince us that it was actually working, but that it just,
He just wanted the windows
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, the 460 air conditioning, 4 windows down, 60 miles an hour. That's what he had cooking for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I remember from that day was that my invitation must have gotten lost in the mail to that wedding. But it's long past. So
I'm
let
sure
it
you were out
slide.
mowing your lawn or something.
Right.
Sorry, Gip, I was in charge of the guest list and I must have just not known.
That's
My
all
fault.
right. That's all right. Well, you know why you didn't? Because I'm from Russell, which Brad likes to point out quite a bit. So that town really doesn't exist socially. So as far as Tylerites are concerned, so it's fine. I completely understand.
Were you done, Danica, or did you have more from the year?
no, that's it. Because I think we're going to talk about music memories of the year later.
Yeah, so well, why don't you kick that off? So like, what do you remember of the music of, so actually I should just go quick first and explain what we're doing and why we're doing this. So, and I mentioned this 2 weeks ago in our episode when we drafted the songs. We always make our list of music, and I always pick albums as much as possible because I like to listen to albums. And I started making my list, and I remembered this year being amazing. Like I could have named 5 of these that I knew came out in '96 right off the bat. But I ended up with 22 albums written down, not even counting the songs that we drafted. And so I'm like, well, I don't know what to do because I can't just pick one. And so then I decided to make a bracket, which we haven't done yet, which is something that I love, is brackets and tournaments. And so then I took 2 out and I had 20 left over. So originally when I sent this out, we had a play-in round, but I did take out 4 of the albums, which we'll come back to in a minute here. And so we ended up with a Sweet 16. So we are going to be ranking and discussing 16 albums from 1996. Now, some of these are going to be big ones that everybody knows and likes, and some of these are ones that I liked because these are the ones I picked. So what hopefully is that some of you found some things you like, and maybe somebody listening will go try out something too. But there was so many albums that I listened to in my car back and forth all over the place wherever I would drive that I just couldn't pick one, couldn't pick two. I picked 16. So that's what we're going to be discussing. So Danica, why don't you start? What is your music memory? Did you have a favorite album, song, station, genre, anything at all?
Well, actually what came to mind, because we didn't have Spotify back then, obviously we were listening to CDs, but I thought about when you mentioned that station, Rev 105 was
I will
the
bring
radio
that up
station
multiple times.
that was always on in the car. And so I just remember I've just had a real love for Rev 105 and Brian Oak, listening to Brian Oak every day. I commuted to work between Richfield and West St. Paul, and I would listen to Rev 105 every day on the way to work, which I loved. And that kind of led me to another memory, was that Rev 105 was like the cooler version of The Edge.
Edge
Remember The Edge?
93.7.
Yes. And the thing that I remember about The Edge is that station changed formats around that time, where I think originally they were kind of like a heavy metal. And then they did this thing. It was really a genius marketing tactic. For a weekend, I don't think there had been any announcement made that they were going to be changing this format to this more alternative music format. And they started playing It's the End of the World as We Know It. And they played that song on repeat all weekend long. And people, if you were channel flippers, because I remember we were in the car and heard it and we were like, wait a minute, they just played that song. And then every time you got in the song, it was on. And it was this big deal. I guess people, I looked a little bit up about it, and it said that people called 911. They logged 50 calls to 911 because people were concerned that maybe they had taken the DJs hostage or something. And I very much remember that happening, that was kind of a phenomenon that weekend, that song was just constantly playing and people were trying to figure out what's going on. And then The Edge was announced, I think that Sunday night of that weekend or something.
So that was
two
before,
radio stations.
that was when they changed to The Edge, the alternative station, not when they switched out.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Or maybe they did it again when they switched out. I don't know. I just know that happened when they changed to The Edge.
Yeah, The Edge was great. I listened to it all the time in college, but they would play the same like 10 to 15 songs over and over and over again. They were great songs and you'd hear them all, but the Rev played everything. And so it's a great mix.
It was kind of like the current is now, in my opinion. So
All right, well,
kind of my music memory.
let's flip it to Craig then, since he's sitting right there.
So 1996, musically, this was a fun list for me to go through because, if I made 16, a lot of these would be on mine too. And then having worked for the company that Brad referred to earlier, I was a music buyer. And I got to go to shows, I got free copies. Many of these albums, we got to go to the show. There's a couple of them we actually got to meet the artist. So it was just a really good year of memories for music for us. The other thing that we were talking about that was kind of interesting about these artists is as good as a year in music as it was, we felt like this is the year that a lot of our favorite artists released records that were good, but none of them were like the best record of the artist. So it was kind of interesting in that, at least in our opinion. So that was kind of interesting going through this. And actually, there's one that I would say I think is my favorite of the artists, but the rest of them, there's maybe a couple, but and then there was a few honorable mentions that I can bring up later that I thought were missing.
Okay, good. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
At the end, we'll go through the leftovers and anything that you guys had that maybe you wanted to mention. Okay, Rappy, what do you have prepared for 1996?
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Sorry about
he's
that.
back.
Like I said, I was working at that metal shop factory for 10 hours a night, and we were allowed to wear headphones. So CD players didn't work because they were just, any jiggle, any movement, it would, jump songs. So I had to transfer all my CDs to cassettes. And so I had like 4 cassettes on this cassette Walkman listening to throughout the evening. And for that summer, my rotation was Midnight Oil, U2, Soul Coffee, and Beck. And that, all those albums would get me through one night. So I was listening to entire albums the entire time I was there. And that's my biggest memory, is those four artists were just in constant rotation in my brain as I was pressing out nails or bending things to get shipped off to someplace. So
Nice. We did see, did you happen to go to the Joshua Tree 30th anniversary tour?
I did not. I wish I would have.
Craig and Danica and I were all at that, and Beck opened. So mentioning those two together was like we saw them play together a few years ago, and it was pretty awesome. Okay, Giff, you get to talk now.
All right.
What do you remember? Bring some country in.
So, and that is where I'll start here. So I started in Morris end of sophomore year, and then transferred to the main campus. So my roommates and I all really enjoyed a lot of country music. I was listening to country with Courtney as well. She really enjoyed that while I was in Morris. Then I moved to and there it was a little bit more hip hop and a little bit more R&B. One of the guys, Fly Shacker, who was in my fraternity, he would be our DJ for our parties. So he mixed in a little bit more dance music into the parties. So listen to more of that. So I would say at the beginning of the year a little more country, end of the year a little bit more hip hop. So that would be my big change. And then of course that summer I was coming up to Bemidji every other weekend to see Courtney. And in my 92 Cavalier, I had a tape deck, and I put together those 90-minute mixtapes of just whatever stuff I had. I'd record off of CDs that I had, put it on tape, much like Rappy. And I would listen to, maybe 2 or 3 of those, maybe 4 on that 5-hour drive from Russell to Bemidji every other weekend. So yeah, that's what I got for music memories of 96.
Right, so cassettes were still a thing in 1996 too, and
Well,
mixtapes and everything.
If your dad didn't build you a little shelf for your CD player.
That's right.
So.
All right, well, we're going to get started pretty quick here. So I did have 4 cuts. So I'm going to just quick mention the 4 albums that I originally listed that I thought I listened to a lot, but I ended up cutting, and I think I made the right choice because as I went through these, the 16 we're going to talk about, I would listen to every one of these beginning to end. So part of my scoring system that I'm going to go through includes skips, and I had 5 skips total for the whole 16 albums. So there's hardly any on there. These 4 albums that I'm going to list now that originally were part of this were kind of the opposite, where there was 3 to 5 songs I really, really loved, but the whole album I probably didn't really listen to that much. And so that's why I took them out, and it made for the easy 16. So last week we talked about Tin Cup, and we talked about the Tin Cup soundtrack. So if you want to hear Gifford's opinion and my opinion on that, you can go back to last week. We've already covered it. Another soundtrack that was big that year was the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack. But really, I really only listened to 3 or 4 songs out that I really liked. But you had Garbage, you had Everclear, and then this band, the Wannadies, that has a song that I love, a couple songs that I've discovered that I love were on there. But that was a huge album because the movie was big, especially with younger people and bringing Shakespeare in. Tracy Bonham, The Burdens of Being Upright, was my 3rd cut, and that had 3 songs that I love. She's most famous for the song Mother, Mother, where she screams, and it's awesome, but she also sang the song The One and Sharks Can't Sleep, and there was other good ones on there too. And then the big cut that surprised me was Beck, and so Rappy mentioned this, so he's probably upset that I cut this, but Odelay came out, and immediately I loved it, and Devil's Haircut and The New Pollution are 2 of my favorite songs of the whole year, probably. But the more I thought about it, I really only listened to the singles off that album. I didn't really listen to the whole album that much. And so to make it 16, that one had to get the cut. So that's probably the most controversial one that I cut because it had some big hits and people probably have good memories of that. So did any of you have anything to say about those albums? Anything you want to throw in? And this would be the time too, Craig, or anybody. If you have albums that you think we should have included, maybe let's do that right now. So what are your honorable mentions, or what do you have to say about these 4 cuts, if you have any memories? I'll throw it to Rappy first this time.
I know for me, like you're saying, Beck was a tough one for me. I've seen Beck in concert probably 4 or 5 times. And I'm pretty sure, I think it was either summer of 96, 97, went to some music festival, and it was Beck, Soul Coughing, Big Bad Voodoo Daddies in the lineup. The one thing awesome. I remember about seeing Beck was there was a gallon of milk on the stage, and throughout his set, he drank the whole thing while still singing. And it was, I think, one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
That's odd. Do you think he does that all the time, or was that just like something he was doing that
That's
night?
the only time I've seen him do that. So
okay. All right. How about Danica?
Yeah, I was of those that you cut. I was not impressed. I before you cut them, I listened to Tracy Bonham. It was not, that song Mother Mother, but I was like, wow, that was kind of hard to actually for me to get through and listen to. So I didn't mind too much that got cut.
Well, I'm sorry you had to listen to the whole thing first. I should have been quicker.
That's okay. But yeah, I was surprised that you cut Odelay because for Beck. But I will say, I guess now why you explained why you cut it, I'm looking back at the notes because I had listened to that one too, end to end. And yes, his hits off that album were very memorable and I loved them. But I wrote some notes here that I didn't like some of the other, it was very experimental. Some of the other songs, just a lot of different sounds and things. It was a little like weird for me that I was like, okay, well, then maybe that's why Brad cut it. So
that is very good.
And I didn't really think of anything to add, but I think Craig, that might be a good segue to you. You had some that.
All right. And I know Craig said he spent 3 hours disseminating tin cups, so I'm sorry that he did that too, but what do you got, Craig?
I would agree on Beck. That was one that it would probably still be in my 16 if I was going to make 16. But I think your logic is sound, and I would agree with that to an extent. I kind of have to be in a mood to go through an entire Beck album, but the singles on that, and I would include Where It's At in that, are some of the best songs of the year for sure. The 3 that I wrote down, maybe I was hanging on to the grunge era here, but I had Soundgarden Down on the Upside. That had Burden in My Hand, which might be my favorite song of that year.
Which I think, didn't I draft that 2 weeks ago, Giff? I think that was in my draft list. So
I believe it was.
Either that or I mentioned it. I don't remember. So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Stone Temple Pilots, Tiny Music.
That was I own that one too. That was originally on my list as well.
That's a good one. Although that's probably one that I would struggle to get all the way through consistently. And then the last one is sort of an ode to, if you remember in the early 90s, I think even late 80s, they started doing MTV Unplugged. And there was some great performances and recordings from that. And one that was released, or at least I think it was released because that's on Spotify. It shows the date of 96, was Alice in Chains Unplugged, which I think was just an outstanding performance.
Yeah.
And something I think I appreciate now more than I did in 1996. But I thought that would definitely be on my top 10 for the year.
All right. How about you, Giff?
I would have left the Tin Cup in just because
Yeah.
of all the albums. That's one that, you know, I'm a little more familiar with because of the movie and just hearing them throughout.
That's why I'm glad we talked about it last week, so you can still do it.
So, and that's exactly why, you know, one of the reasons I'm glad I, you know, picked the movie so that it got some airtime as well. So other than that, just because, again, we were challenged so much by Mrs. Giff that we don't ever pick women. We got to throw Spice out there for Spice Girls that came out in 96. You know, I was, you know, massive huge album as well. So
It was massive.
I'm just going to put it out there just to placate. So.
Well, you are a good husband.
Oh, I try to be.
Can I
All right,
interject
well,
one? Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Can I interject just one? Because I was thinking about the Rev and local bands. And so I looked this up. And so I do have an honorable mention of Tim Mahoney had released that year his second album called Now. And I still listen to some of the tracks on that album today. I thought that was a really good one. And that was a local guy that we were probably listening to on the Rev. So.
All right. Yep. I don't know that I ever listened to him much, but I know he was a big guy in the 90s in Minneapolis.
Mhm.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think we can get into it now. So we've got a bracket. We've got 4 number 1 seeds. So like they do with the NCAA tournament, I'm going to reveal our number 1 seeds right now. So for these are definitely 4 that I would have put high anyway, but I also wanted to include ones that would be like popular, more so than some of the other ones I picked. The one, though, that's probably the least popular is my number 1 overall seed, and that is partially due to where we live, and that is Semisonic's debut album, The Great Divide. And so that's our number 1 overall seed. Most of us here love them, and they are huge in my life, and that album is amazing, and so it's the number 1 seed. The second number 1 seed, if you've ever listened to this show, you probably know my favorite band of all time is REM. And they released New Adventures in Hi-Fi that year, which is one of their sneaky great albums. It's not one you usually would get mentioned as their best, but real fans know that it is amazing and one of their best albums. The third number 1 seed is the Counting Crows, Recovering the Satellites, their daring follow-up to August and Everything After. Much different than the original, and I love it. Big hits came off it as well. And your number 1 seed is Sheryl Crow and her self-titled sophomore album, which had just huge hits on it. And if you listen to the album, it was good all the way through, in my opinion. So those are the leaders of each bracket, and we are going to start in the Semisonic region tonight with this. So I will introduce each matchup. I will share why I picked the album, and then you guys will tell what you thought about it, and then we will pick a winner. So our first matchup is a battle of alternative bands, both, in my opinion, very underappreciated bands, both with lead singers that have solo and songwriting careers outside of the band, and both who are still playing as well. Semisonic actually just released an album like a year ago that I thought was excellent. This is their debut, and we are going to talk about Soul Coughing as well. Soul Coughing's sophomore album, Irresistible Bliss. So why did I pick Semisonic Great Divide? Well, this is one of those albums right off the bat. I had heard of the band first, I'm pretty sure, through Craig. So Craig knew all the, he knew all the local bands, and he's older than me. So he had all this stuff. And I had just lived in Minneapolis for 2 years at this time. So Danica sitting there was a huge influence on me in my music life too. But half of what she influenced me with was influence from Craig to start with there. So he's been very important. But I knew about them. I'd heard of the band Trip Shakespeare, which they formed from. I heard the song Down in Flames on Rev 105, and I loved it. Now, this was interesting because there was a book written by Jacob Schleister, who is the drummer. And he talked about, it's about the band and how they just never really took off the way they should have. And it's really interesting. But the label or whoever was making the decisions wanted that to be the first single because it had more of that 90s grunge kind of sound to it. And the band was like, this isn't really the one that we would pick. And so there was some debate there. And I think the song is great. But, they didn't really take off, and they attributed it somewhat to the choice of first single. Anyway, I was working at Best Buy, as I said, 2 weeks ago. So Craig was, he was up there, but I worked in the store surrounded by a sea of CDs. I bought all these. I bought this CD. I instantly loved the band. I instantly loved this album. I saw their 20th anniversary concert a few years ago when they played the whole thing beginning to end. And they just deserve so much better. So couple stats. It was released April 9th of 1996. This one did not chart on Billboard at all, although their next one did. But they did have a lot of big local buzz, and the song Fascinating New Thing was used in the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, and so some of their songs you might have heard through things like that. And if you know anything about their lead singer, Dan Wilson, he's an amazing artist who has written hits for Taylor Swift and Adele and won Grammys, and so there's so much going on there. So that's why I picked them. I'm going to start with my co-host Giff. What'd you think of this album, or what were your thoughts?
I enjoyed, again, I didn't listen to the entire album. Brad did give us 3 songs to listen to off of each album. Obviously, we're welcome to listen to the entire thing.
As a last resort, I did that.
He did mention 5. He gave this to me 5 weeks ago. And I maybe didn't get through all the albums. But no, I enjoyed it. It was, I think reminiscent of the time. Like, I think now when you listen to music, like a song could come out and you don't know if it came out in 2015 or 2020 or 2010, but this felt like music that I was listening to when I got to the cities in '96. So yeah, I enjoyed what I listened to.
Did you have a favorite song?
Yes. Do you want me to reveal that at this moment?
I didn't. Were you going to reveal it later? I don't know.
Fascinating New Thing was the song that I was going with on this one. So
okay, all right. How about you, Rappy?
So this just brought me back to the sound of the Twin Cities of during that time. And Semisonic, fantastic band. And I can't remember if I told this story here before, but I was at a Semisonic concert and snuck backstage.
Yes, you have. I remember that now.
So yeah, so being able to see a concert and hanging out with their family really, cements them as a legacy music for me. All their stuff is fantastic. It just it is almost the theme song of the cities for '96. So no, I really enjoyed it. It was great getting brought back and just remembering. I haven't listened to this album for a long time, but I just really enjoyed it. And it's tough for me to pick a favorite one. Yeah, I got to give it to the album and not just a single song.
Okay. How about Danica?
So some of my notes, this is just a fantastic album. And that opener of FNT, Fascinating New Thing, that's just such a great opener to an album, the guitar that's in there. And then Brad, you know that I love a good lyric. And Dan Wilson, he's a bit of a romantic, I feel like a lot of times in a lot of his songs, he has kind of romantic lyrics. And so when I was re-listening to it, the lyric that I wrote down that I love in FNT is, "I'm surprised that you've never been told before that you're lovely and you're perfect and that somebody wants you." When that song comes on, I just love singing that lyric because it's just a really cool lyric.
It's a fun one to sing along to because the way they deliver it makes it even better.
Yes. And I also liked on there, "If I Run" and "Delicious" were kind of my other 2 favorite songs off that. I love in "Delicious" the ooh, ooh, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they are known for using the word "yeah." Me and our friend Ryan Hummel, we say that all the time. We just throw "yas" into anything, and we're always referring to Dan Wilson and Semisonic.
Oh, that's cool. That's a great song with that.
Craig?
Yeah.
Well, you already mentioned my influence on a couple of you here on this band. And you mentioned Trip Shakespeare, but in the late 80s and early 90s, my friends and I would go and see them at all at the Caboose and probably the 400 bar and wherever we could, the red carpet in St. Cloud. And when I was a senior in college, I got on a committee to get a band to come it's called Pine Stock at St. John's. And we got Trip Shakespeare. So we got to hang out with them all day backstage, and they're just really down to earth, good people. Really enjoyed spending time with them. So love Trip Shakespeare. So when this came out, I was really excited to kind of see what was the next iteration of Trip Shakespeare. And this album, I think, this might be my favorite of theirs. Songs, there's 2 that I would probably mention that haven't been mentioned. One is Temptation. It's very different than a lot of the rest of them. I love that song. And then I also have Falling on my list because it reminds me a lot of like a Trip Shakespeare kind of a song. And I completely agree with them that Down in Flames would not have been the first single that I would have pushed.
Yeah.
Based upon the rest of the comments, FNT would have been the one I would have recommended be the single.
Yeah. And I should mention, so you've all mentioned favorite songs. So nobody's mentioned it's not the title track, because the title track, the album title is Great Divide, but the song is called Across the Great Divide. And that is probably one of my top 3 all-time favorite songs, period, of just any song. It's one of those songs. And there's another one later tonight on an album. When it's done playing, I gotta listen to it again right away. And I could listen to it over and over and over and just never get sick of it. And so that song alone is enough for me to love it, but I love the whole thing, which you'll see with my rating system here very soon.
That's right. We haven't unveiled the rating system yet.
Nope, it's coming. We got one more album to talk about before we get into ratings. So we are then comparing this to Soul Coughing's Irresistible Bliss. So Mike Doty, I know that I'm going to be turning this to Rappy first because he's a huge fan, and I love this right off the bat. This was such a unique sound. It was totally cool. And his voice is so unique, and I love it. So the first song I heard was Soundtrack to Mary, and which I never really understood, because it's like, is this a soundtrack? What? But the name of the song is Soundtrack to Mary, and it was awesome. It was so cool. This is an album that I remember having a couple skips on it. That's why I ranked it a little lower. But after listening again, there really weren't any for me until the very end. So it's a solid album all the way through. It was released July 9th of 1996. Soundtrack to Mary did reach number 37. And Super Bon Bon reached number 27 on the modern rock charts for several weeks. So it did have 2 songs that charted on the modern rock chart list. All right, so like I said, it's great, and I'm going to have Rappy go next because I know this is probably his favorite of everything tonight.
This is my big one. This is the one I want to push forward as far as I can. So first of all, you're talking about Best Buy, brought back so many memories. Best Buy is where I discovered Soul Coffin. So I remember going into their store, going into the CD racks, and they had headphones with sample plays. So you could just throw on and listen, and just they had Soul Coughing there and listen to it. And the moment I heard this, is like, I am buying this album. And I listened, like I wore out CDs, I wore out the cassettes I made copies of. This was my personal theme song, this album. I've seen Soul Coffin I think I've seen Soul Coffin in concert 3 times. So saw them once at First Avenue. And I've seen Mike Doty multiple times. One of the best times I ever saw him was he was doing a house tour. And up in Arden Hills, I got a ticket to go in somebody's living room and see Mike Doty play. And it was fantastic. It was an amazing little concert. People sitting on the floor and just, there was maybe 20 of us in there. It was just incredible. So yeah, like I said, this album was my theme song. Definitely Super Bon Bon was my ultimate pick from this album. And I can still, like, anytime that starts playing, I'm like, I'm back in 96. It's a fantastic song and one of my favorite albums of all time.
Nice. Giff, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I was completely new to this, and I really enjoyed.
So you didn't remember the song Soundtrack to Mary from like in college?
I didn't know.
Okay, I thought you probably recognized that one.
You have to
or
remember
Super
my
Bon
brain.
Bon, actually.
My brain is mush. But Super Bon Bon, first off, I mean, that is just kick you in the pants. I love the funk in that. Fun fact about that song. So this was the entrance song from 98 to 01 for Danny Doring and Roadkill, a tag team wrestling group from Extreme Championship Wrestling. 4 out of 5. I described that as mathematically dirty. Definitely enjoyed that. Also, Soft Serve was high on my list as well for this one. So yeah, definitely enjoyed the album or what I listened to of it.
Well, Soundtrack to Mary and Super Bon Bon were mentioned. I was glad to hear somebody mention 4 out of 5 because that was also on my list. I would add Lazy Bones as another song that I really enjoyed. And Soul Coughing, well, I'll get into that, I guess, when we rate. But fun fact, we're going to keep talking about Best Buy, but so I was a music buyer, and I remember the label coming in to tell us about Soul Coughing and the record, and that in '96, when this was out there, Minneapolis was actually the top market for Soul Coughing. And they had Soul Coughing sold more CDs out of Minneapolis than any other market, which was crazy. And they just couldn't believe it. They don't know why, but Minneapolis is definitely a Soul Coughing city.
Okay. Probably because of Rev 105. I think they played a ton of it. That helps.
I do know, I think it's on this album, Rev 105 is mentioned in the liner notes. And I think Brian Oak actually had a ton to do with Soul Coughing's popularity within the metro area.
Okay. Danica?
Yeah, love Soundtrack to Mary. A few notes that I wrote on this one. I'd never obviously listened to this end to end before. I think for me, his voice is best in small doses. To try and listen to an album, to listen to an album end to end, it wasn't really for me. But I also wrote by 4 out of 5 that was a quirky and fun song that was unexpected for me. That was one that when I was listening to it, I was like, oh, I kind of like this one. So, and I thought that they seemed a little bit more like experimental, also kind of like Beck, where there was just some weird, crazy things going on sometimes, which is not usually my jam. So I appreciate who they are as artists, but not so much for me.
All right. So now we're going to decide who wins. And so I made up a ranking scale, and you guys sounds like you didn't. So you're going to share why you picked them, but I'm going to introduce my scale right now. It's called the BS scale because my initials are BS, but also because I'm picking bangers and there's banger scoring. So I started with the banger percentage. I highlighted every song I considered a banger to me. And so it didn't matter how many songs were on the album because it was a percentage. So Semisonic had 11 out of 12 to me, 92%. Wow. Soul Coughing had 7 out of 12, 58%. That's still a lot of bangers. Then I would subtract from that. So if it had 92%, it was a 9.2. Then I would subtract the number of skips there were. And skips, I meant like, I was pretty picky on that. Like it had to be pretty much a necessary skip. If it was a song I didn't love, then I didn't skip it. I had one skip on Soul Coughing, the very last song. So then I would subtract a 1 from that. Then finally, there was 3 more points added for if I considered this a classic album by the artist. And so you kind of brought that up earlier, Craig, that some of these you thought maybe weren't your favorite, but were they a classic? So with Semisonic, I think it's a slam dunk. They had 2 really classic albums. So it's a 3 out of 3 for me. And for Soul Coughing, to me, this is definitely their best one. They had other good stuff too. But so they both got 3 out of 3 on that. So I am moving Semisonic on by having a total BS score of 12.2 to Soul Coughing's 7.8.
Wow.
All right. Let's go to Craig next. Who are you picking?
Well, my scale is more of a scale of art versus science.
There you go.
So, and for me, it's just not even fair to put Semisonic against Soul Coughing because Semisonic meant and Strip Shakespeare meant so much to me. I would agree a little bit with Danica on typically Soul Coughing. I would put kind of like Radiohead, where I have to be in a mood to listen to a whole album. Maybe I would do 2 or 3 songs at a time, or have songs in a mix. So to me, it was kind of easy pick for Semisonic just because all the personal connection to me.
Well, and that's why they are the #1 overall seed. All right, we'll go to Danica quick. I'm pretty sure we know her pick too.
Yes, and I pretty much on my picks, I guess I decided my winners by since we were doing albums, I picked by if I had these 2 albums in front of me and I knew I was going to listen to it like end to end in the car, what would I want? And Semisonic, obviously, for me, because I'm not that familiar with Soul Coughing. I did give it a try, but as an end-to-end, it had no chance against Semisonic.
All right, we'll save Rappy for last. Gifford, which one did you pick?
I went Soul Coughing.
Okay.
Just because there was, if you want to put banger, ranking in there, Super Bon Bon was just such a fun song. I don't know how many times I listened to it over just because I really enjoyed the song. So, but there were
You could have listened to other full albums in that case if you're repeating songs.
I mean, all right then.
Gotcha.
But I just think because I was a little more surprised by it, and maybe it was the mood I was in when I was listening to it. Like you say, you need to be in a certain mood to maybe get into soul coughing. But I just enjoyed it more than what I listened to for Semisonic. So
all right,
I'm going there out.
So it's going to be a 3-2 score. But Rappy, why did you pick Soul Coughing? Make your case, and you can leave with the last word.
Thank you. So where my rating scale was, after listening to the 2 albums back to back, which one am I going to grab and which one am I going to go take a drive with? And for me, Soul Coughing was the one I would grab and want in my car listening to as I cruised into the sunset. So much of it is Mike Doty's voice, the unusual sound. It never got boring to me. It never sounded cliche. And it just like I said, it was my soundtrack or my theme song album of my life of 96.
All right. Well, moving on is Semisonic with a 3-2 score into the Elite 8. Any last words there from anybody on that one?
It's unfortunate that for Rappy that he ran into the Semisonic fan club.
Yes. Well, and it's going to be unfortunate for other ones too here, just depending on who they're up against. But that's how tournaments work. One and done.
And this one out of all of them was my hardest choice because okay. I do feel like I am part of that Semisonic fan club, but Soul Coughing just wins out for me.
All right. Well, Semisonic will move on, and they are going to face the number 2 seed in this region. The number 2 or 3 in this seed in this region. Sorry. So our next battle is a battle of soundtracks. So I mentioned Tin Cup and Romeo and Juliet. There were a lot of soundtracks from this year that were really big with me. And these are 2 of my all-time favorites. And we've talked about these movies, and we've talked about the soundtracks at times too. So these are 2 movies about a group of guys. A lot of them are like overthinkers. Some people, and I know this from experience, would say that these movies are sexist and they don't age well. And I disagree with that all the way. I mentioned 2 weeks ago, I think, when we talked, we brought up Beautiful Girls. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned that I was on a different podcast and we talked about it. And I was the only one that liked the movie and I had to defend it, which I couldn't believe. But that and Swingers are our 2 choices here. And Swingers is one of my all-time favorite movies. And the soundtrack was part of that too. These movies have a ton in common. They're about a group of guys. They're about, they're kind of immature and stupid sometimes. They're trying to figure stuff out. The soundtracks also overlap. There's a song that's on both, and there's a mixture of new songs and old songs on both. And so I just feel like, to me, they've always been like siblings, and they've always been kind of one in the same to me. So we'll start with the 2 seed, which is the Swingers soundtrack. And this was heavy on Big Bad Voodoo Daddy songs, which I love. This is the height of the swing movement in the mid-90s. And the first time I ever went to First Avenue was to see Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. And it was a pretty cool night. And the people were swing dancing down on the floor. And this is one I would listen to in my car over and over and over again. And Brian Setzer was big at this time. And it was a whole movement. And I thought Big Bad Voodoo Daddy was a cool band name. But there's standards and oldies on here. You got like Dean Martin, and you've got I can't remember the guy at the end now anymore, but it's such a cool mix of music. And the reason why I love it so much is because when I hear a song, I can almost instantly picture where it was played in the movie. And since I love the movie so much, that's a really big deal. So this came out October 15th of 1996. This was a gold album. It did sell over 500,000 copies. I think it's of the 3 tonight so far. I think it's actually the biggest one commercially. And I loved it. And that's why I picked it. So, Craig, what do you have to say about the Swingers soundtrack?
I would repeat a lot of what you said. I like the Big Bad Voodoo Daddy songs. I also, and the Dean Martin, of course, but I also listed the Average White Band song.
Yes, pick up the
I don't remember
pieces.
the name of it. It's a great song though. And then the Bobby Darin song, I think, is the one you were referring to at
That's
the
what I
end.
was thinking of. Bobby Darin,
I love that song.
George Jones.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Tony
a great.
Bennett.
The soundtracks are, to me, there's like a compilation. But this one to me was a good one. But like, I probably won't vote it through anything because it's a compilation. But I like this one because it's a lot of Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, so it almost feels like a little bit of a showcase for them.
Right.
But yes, I do like this album, and I actually, of course, love the movie too.
All right. Gifford.
Well, I'm like Rappy with Soul Coughing. This is my album of all the 16. I love
Really?
the big band swing. I love Paid for Love. Like it's a lounge,
That's a great
Vegas
song.
lounge song. Like I've always wanted to be a lounge singer. I think it'd be just such a fun job to just, watch these people. Like that song to me could have been in Vacation where Clark is going through the bar in
To the
one
pool.
scene. Yeah, and you got the piano player just watching him go around and talk to people. I just love it. I love the old, like you say, the old standards along with it. It's just so much fun. And like you brought up the Pick Up the Pieces song. Like that song to me reminds me of Iron Man 2. There's a scene in there with Sam Rockwell. Of course, we love Sam Rockwell on the show, where he's dancing like James Brown, trying to act cool. But it's such a great song. And to me, it's just the most fun I had listening to. And this, I listened through the whole way on this one.
So you had listened to this back then too, then, or?
No, I hadn't listened to it back then, but again, familiar enough with the movie to, like you say,
All right. So you know all the
certain
songs
parts.
from the movie.
Yeah, remember, okay, this was on this scene and this was in this scene. So, yeah, just really, really enjoyed this album.
All right. Danica.
Yeah, I really liked this, I guess, more than I thought I was going to, just remembering the big bad Voodoo Daddy band. It's not a band that I would call up on a playlist right now, so that was fun. And I also marked down that Pick Up the Pieces was a song that I really liked, and I was asking, is that the song that was playing when they were doing that full one take in the scene where they're walking through the restaurant, and it's like that whole one take scene?
I thought it was played when they're in their cars, in the big caravan of cars.
Oh, could be then too. I don't know.
But
I
Gifford
just
might disagree.
I thought it was like the Reservoir Dogs takeoff of the walk down the alley.
No, but she's talking about when they go through the back door through the restaurant, and then it's a different song, I think. Playing
I think
during
it's a
that
different
scene.
song. That's that one. But yeah,
Is it when they go in the house of pain guy?
I just really remember that scene in the movie was very memorable to me. So I did very much enjoy it. I liked the song. They sang a song, "I Want to Be Like You," that was the
From
song
the Jungle Book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was fun to hear, and yeah, I liked it.
All right. Well, Rappy, you picked this movie. It's between you and me. It's probably the favorite movie between the two of us that we've both liked ever. Do you like the soundtrack as much?
I think the soundtrack is just fantastic. It's such a unique take of the time where it really feels like a transition of like older style music. You got like Groove Me from King Floyd, King of the Road from Roger Miller, but then Big Bad Voodoo Daddy kind of bringing it all together. And it just feels like almost two generations of music coming together. And I really think it just kind of highlights the whole movie, which always felt to me as a transitional period of getting out of college and getting into career. It really, to take another movie quote, it really tied the whole room together between the movie and the music. So I thought it was a brilliant way of doing needle drops throughout the movie and bringing in the old with the new.
All right. Well, this is up against the Beautiful Girls soundtrack, which, in my opinion, I've already said is very similar. There's a crossover in songs and style a little bit. They're both great movies that I loved. This one, the vibe is a little different, but they fit the vibe of the movie so well that that's part of what I love. Like it's a little more downbeat probably than the Swingers one, although not all of it. But the movie has that winter time, just kind of, a little more forlorn vibe going on to it. Also, I think of a lot of these when I think of the scenes in the movie when I hear them. And this is one where there were other songs that didn't even make the album, like the breakup song, I Got You, I Ran, Honey White by Morphine, Fool to Cry by Rolling Stones. I mean, these are some amazing songs in the movie that didn't even make the soundtrack, so it could have been even better. It came out January 30th of 1996, and I will ask Danica to say what she likes or did not like about this one.
Well, I will piggyback off what you said about the vibe of this album. I wrote down that it had a very earnest and sad vibe, which I get that's it kind of fits the movie, but I guess for me, it just didn't things just did not click with me on this one listening to it. So, and I know you're a huge fan of the movie, but I'm also not a great big fan of the movie either. So.
Oh, I thought you liked it a lot.
No, I mean, no.
Okay.
I don't think it's aged, I will say I don't think it's aged very well either. So.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Craig.
I remember that I liked the movie, but I don't know that I've watched it probably since 1996. So I'd be curious to watch it again. I like the soundtrack, and I agree that if I actually didn't remember that there was a Morphine song
Yeah.
in the movie.
It's when he's
Yeah, that
slamming
wasn't a
the
soundtrack.
snow up against her garage door. It's really good.
But I love Morphine. That was one of my favorite underground bands of the 90s. Songs that stood out to me were Me and Mrs. Jones, Graduation Day by Chris Isaak,
Yeah, you got Chris
Beautiful
Isaak.
Girl, and then of course Beth by Kiss.
Mhm.
It's just
Yeah.
classic. So
Those are great. Rappy?
So I'm not familiar with this movie. It was
Really?
not on my radar. It is not. Yeah. So I definitely need to go back and watch it sometime. But looking over the soundtrack, it's a good lineup. Yeah. Anytime you have Kiss doing Beth is a fantastic song. Again, King Floyd, Groove Me, also on the Swingers. Greatly appreciate that. I've always been a fan of the Afghan Wigs. So yeah, it intrigued me to see the movie now. So
All right, well, I would like to hear from you if you watch it. Gifford, finish it off.
I like that there's a mix, like you say, it kind of mirrors the tone of the movie, but I mean, there's a mix of country, blues. I mean, we got Sweet Caroline in the soundtrack, for crying out loud. I mean, you can't go wrong with.
Which is a big scene in the movie, too.
Yeah. So, I mean, that right off the bat is just phenomenal. But yeah, I mean, I was, fan of Me and Mrs. Jones, Graduation Day. So I enjoyed it. But as we go to our pick, I think I kind of already tipped my hand on that.
All right, well, I think we kind of all know where this one's going anyway. So I wasn't going to go first this time, but I don't think there's any drama. So for this one, my BS scale score of Swingers was 7.9. I had 11 out of 16 bangers, no skips. And for Beautiful Girls, I had 7.1. There was one skip. There is one Afghan Wig song I don't like. I don't mind the other one. But a lot of bangers. And this one I gave them each, since it's not an artist, I said, is this like a classic soundtrack? And I gave them both 1 out of 3, because I don't think anybody's going to, even though I love them, nobody's going to confuse these for Footloose or Top Gun or like a classic soundtrack.
Yeah, Purple
So
Rain,
that's how I
yeah.
did that. All right, so I'm picking Swingers. Is anybody not picking Swingers?
Swingers.
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 All right, it's unanimous. All right, we're going to move on to the next bracket, which is the Sheryl Crow region. And our first one here is a battle of singer-songwriters. So we have Sheryl Crow's second album, which is her self-titled, up against Chris Isaak, one of my all-time favorites. And one of our biggest episodes here was when we did Chris Isaak's Forever Blue album. This was the album that came out right after Forever Blue. So he had many albums out at this time, but it was definitely a little bit different for him because he does covers and other stuff on it as well. He even made it with a documentary that was made with this. And I feel like he was probably trying to build off the success of Forever Blue because it was a pretty big hit for him. So he went back and recorded some of his older songs in this new way. And so we'll get to that in a second. But the Sheryl Crow album, I wasn't sure if I would love this when it came out. I really liked her debut. It had obviously great songs on it, All I Want to Do. But she's an artist that I didn't know like if I was going to continue to love her. But If It Makes You Happy and Every Day Is a Winding Road were the first two singles, and they're like two of the catchiest songs of the year. So I had to get it. I listened to it a ton in my car driving, and it was one of those where I was pleasantly pleased to find out that I liked the whole thing. It wasn't just those singles. I liked the whole thing all the way through, and some of the album tracks are some of my favorite songs on it. And so then this album, she kind of, in the first one, she had a lot of people helping her and kind of a more of a group effort. This one's self-titled because this is where she really kind of took over and did a lot of the writing, and it was like her thing. So even though it's her second album, it's really, in a way, it's almost kind of like a debut at the same time. This came out September 24th of 1996. It won 2 Grammys, including Best Rock Album. So it really upped her game from that awesome debut. It reached number 6 on the charts and sold over 3 million albums. Let's start on this one with Danica.
Yes, I very much like this one. Probably, I think my all-time favorite song of Sheryl Crow's is Every Day Is a Winding Road. Love that song. And I can't read my own handwriting on some of my notes here.
Well, that's a shock.
Not surprising.
But yes, it makes you happy on there. So yes, overall, I just thought it was a great album, and I do enjoy her voice, and it was good.
Let's continue in the family with Craig.
I like this record. I think I'm more of a Sheryl Crow hits fan. If It Makes You Happy is probably my favorite Sheryl Crow song. I love how it's like just such a Stones riff to start an album is a great way to go. I also have the song Superstar listed on here. But yeah, in general, I do like the song, but I think this wouldn't be like full of bangers to me, the album. It would probably have like 4 bangers on the Brad scale.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm with you. That's kind of what I expected. This is definitely my favorite album of hers. I like the debut a lot, but if I'm going to listen to one all the way, this is the only one, like, other than that, I'm pretty much a singles person too. But that's part of, I think, why I love this one so much is because it is, I feel like it's a level above. Rappy.
So this entire bracket was probably my hardest one, where it was all the bands were kind of not within my wheelhouse during this time. But listening to this one, I realized how much I recognized it.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised on, I should listen to this one more often. Like, this should be in a rotation of mine. Change Would Do You Good. Fantastic song. But yeah, this one surprised me, and I was really glad to listen to it again. And I think in 96 I was just trying to be too macho and too cool to listen to Sheryl Crow. So
can see that. Gifford, you're macho and cool. What did you think?
Well, fans of the show will know that a lot of the music comes to me through the radio.
You like the hits?
And yes, I like the hits. So this album, even though I didn't own it, I was more familiar with it. And again, it's fun to go back and listen to the hits on this and kind of remember where you were at that time in your life. So I did enjoy this one. And like, those before me said, If It Makes You Happy is awesome. Every Day Is a Winding Road, A Change Would Do You Good. Those are the 3 big ones for me off of this one. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
All right. And I love, so all those big hits I like, but the 2 songs that stood out to me that I always loved that were at the end of the album are Oh Marie and Ordinary Morning. I just think those are amazing. And I think her voice in Ordinary Morning is just, it's you get a whole different sense of what she can do.
Very soulful is what I wrote on that one. Yeah.
All right. She is up against one of my all-time favorite artists here, Chris Isaak. But as I said, this is kind of a different album for him because this is full, there's a couple new songs, but it's full of mostly reimaginings of older songs that he did. but it's called Baja Sessions, and it was recorded in Baja, and it just has that vibe of this cool guy on the beach with his guitar, and it's so great to just pop it in and listen to it. I listened to this a lot with my girlfriend at that time, so that stood out too. We talked about Tin Cup last week, and the song I Wonder, we talked about that last week and how it was so perfectly placed in the movie. Entertainment Weekly did not rate this high. They called it Baja Lounge, but I disagree with them. I think it's excellent. It was released October 8th of 1996. It was a gold album, sold over 500,000 copies. So not as big as Forever Blue was, but he definitely kept some momentum going there. And probably, so since I was new to him the previous year, like I was starting to listen to all his older stuff, but like this probably brought in some of those songs that either I didn't know yet or was about to know. And so that stood out to me too. Let's go back to you, Giff. What'd you think of this one?
It was fun. Like you say, we covered Forever Blue, so I kind of got a feel for what you got going on. I think he's a great crooner. His vocals are always excellent. So definitely enjoyed it. Wrong to Love You, a little bit creepy on those lyrics. Not real sure. But still, I like that you've got a mix of different things in here. We had, some country feel with some steel guitar in there. Fun fact here, bassist Raleigh Sally, he's Chris's bassist. Like I say, he wrote Killing the Blues, which has been covered by just about just a ton of people. John Prine and Sean Colvin, Robert Plant, and Alison Krauss put out a version of it. So little fun fact on his bandmate there, but a fun listen. And it was nice to listen to another one of his offerings, but I think I'm going to go the other way on this one when we get around to voting.
I keep telling you to listen to Speak of the Devil. That's the one you got to listen to. All right, Rappy, what do you say on Chris Isaak?
All right, well, excellent.
So Chris Isaak, another one just not on my radar. I think just too intimidated by him, just too good looking of a man, and just made me nervous to even listen to him. But listen to it this time, especially this album. Definitely would like just to have this going on in the background and hearing the whole thing. Thank you for introducing it to me. I'm bummed I missed it back then, but really enjoyed hearing it. Nothing really jumped out at me, but just really enjoyed it. And I just think, have a martini and a cigar while listening to it would be fantastic.
That's right. Craig and Danica.
Yeah, for me, I just kind of wrote that it was a very nice, easy listen and that it was good, but I don't remember any big hits on it, which I understand wasn't maybe his point. Maybe he was a little bit more focused on his acting career during this album, maybe. That's maybe what I remember him more during that time is some of his small roles that he had. So yeah, just I'm going to probably be voting, or I know I will be voting for Sheryl Crow over this one just due to the amount of hits.
Spoiler alert. Craig?
Nope.
Well, Brad, as you know, I'm a big Chris Isaak fan as well. I'm not intimidated by his good looks. If I had his hair, I'd be even better looking than he is. But anyway, my friend Bob introduced me to Chris Isaak. That actually the green cover, the self-titled one. And so this album confuses me a little bit because I had listened to all the albums leading up to this and was very familiar with them. So
right.
Like my four favorite songs on this are actually on Silvertone, which is his first record. And the one that my favorite is probably Back on Your Side. I think that might be one of my favorite Chris Isaak songs.
Love it.
So when it comes to Chris Isaak versus Sheryl Crow, this Chris Isaak record, I lean towards Chris Isaak because I'm just a huge Chris Isaak fan. But it sounds like I think we're gonna lose Chris Isaak here.
Yeah, well, I will save my vote. So Danica, you're voting for Sheryl Crow.
Yes.
Anything you want to say? You're done?
Nope, I just got to go with that because it hits bigger.
And Gifford, you're voting Sheryl Crow.
I am.
And Craig, you want to go with Chris Isaak?
Yes.
Okay, Rappy, how about you?
I'll be going with Sheryl Crow. I'll definitely want to cruise with her in my car.
All right. And I am too. As much as Chris Isaak is one of my all-time favorite artists, this really wasn't close as far as the BS scale. Sheryl Crow had a 9.5. It's a classic album for her, so she got 3 out of 3 there. This is one where Chris Isaak got a 1 out of 3 because it's not a classic for him. I love it, but it's not a classic album for Chris Isaak by any definition. So he lost some points there. Bangers were pretty close overall, although hers are bigger. And neither had a skip. So she was a 9.5 and he's only a 6.4. So easy pick for me, even though he is like on my Mount Rushmore of dudes.
Can I just say one thing that Rappy said he was so intimidated by his good looks that it's hard for him to even like dare to listen to his music, but he's not overly intimidated by the good looking Sheryl Crow. He would ask her to go for a cruise in his car. So I just want to clarify that, Rappy.
I greatly appreciate you pointing that out. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So Sheryl Crow moves on and will face the winner of our next battle, which is an interesting one. We have, I'm calling this one the Battle of Underappreciated Greatness. So you have Paul Westerberg, who I know Craig is going to love. Lead singer of The Replacements, went on to have a solo career and had a great album come out this year. And you have the Fountains of Wayne, who are led by a couple great guys, but Adam Schlesinger, who unfortunately died, 2 or 3 years ago, very young. But the guy was a musical genius. He did all kinds of things outside of the band. And so it's Fountains of Wayne against Paul Westerberg, but the genius there to me is Adam Schlesinger. So after The Replacements, Paul Westerberg grew up and kind of turned into a great singer-songwriter. He was notorious for, having problems on stage, right? They were kind of, you never knew what you were going to get. Adam Schlesinger led one of the catchiest bands ever while also contributing in ways that people may not even know. Like he wrote That Thing You Do and the hits from that movie. He won 3 Emmys. He also won a Grammy. And he wrote countless songs for artists and movies. So the guy was all over the place. And this album, which we're going to start with, is their debut, Fountains of Wayne, self-titled. And this album is just, if you're talking catchy pop, power pop music, I don't think you can hardly beat this. So the first song I ever heard was Radiation Vibe on Rev 105. And I thought it was one of the catchiest things I'd ever heard. I talked to Danica and Craig about it. I knew they liked it. I got the album right away. Everything on this album is catchy. Sink to the Bottom was the next single that they played on Rev 105. This is the same year That Thing You Do came out, too. So this guy had a busy year at that time. The other main member of the band is Chris Collingwood, who he made it with, and he actually wrote some of the catchier songs on here, so it wasn't all Adam Schlesinger. And they tried to outdo each other and make each other laugh. And sometimes the lyrics on their songs, while not only being catchy and great, are funny, which adds a lot of happiness to while you're listening to it. And they were good at that. This was released October 1st, 1996. Radiation Vibe reached number 14 on the alternative airplay chart. That's the only one that charted, which is insane to me because... So like Semisonic going up with their next album and being a giant hit with Closing Time, they finally got their big hit several years later with Stacy's Mom. But I mean, I was on them from the beginning, and while Stacy's Mom is a great song, they had so many other great ones before that too. So let's start with Craig this time, because I know he liked them.
Fountains of Wayne. So this might surprise you a little bit, because of course I do like Radiation Vibe. And you mentioned Sink to the Bottom, which I had on my list. I also had the song Sick Day as one that stood out to me. And while I like the single, the whole album just has never really captured my attention.
Wow.
I don't know that I've ever since I listened to the whole thing for this, and I liked it, but I just kept, my mind wandered. So they just didn't capture my attention. I don't know what it is. I have friends that are my age that love them, but for some reason they've just never grabbed me.
All right, Danica.
Yeah, I was actually disappointed in myself. I was excited to listen to the CD to the album. And I know, here I am. And I thought that I was just gonna have great memories, and it just kind of fell flat for me as an album. I absolutely loved Radiation Vibe. Like you said, I remember hearing that song on Rev. I did write down a couple things that they had, some very funny lyrics, and I love good lyrics. So I appreciated it, but I just didn't love it like I thought I was maybe going to.
I'm shocked.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine because something's got to lose anyway. Maybe it won't even lose, but I'm looking at Joe Ray, Survival Car, Barbara H, I've Got a Flare, Leave the Biker, and Please Don't Rock Me Tonight. Every one of those songs to me is like instantly catchy. Like they just know how to write the hooks. So what you guys are saying, I'm shocked by. I can't believe it. But that's okay. That's music. Gifford, what did you get? Because I'm sure you hadn't heard much.
I hadn't. This was all new to me for this. Obviously, Fountains of Wayne, I know for Stacy's mom, but a lot of songs about girls. That's what I found here. A lot of good lyrics, like Sink to the Bottom. The line I wrote down here, I'm going nowhere and I'm getting there soon. I just think that's such a fun lyric. So yeah, I mean, Leave the Biker. I thought that was just a funny.
Crumbs in his beard from the seafood special.
Yes, I mean, there are fun lyrics, and again, because the only thing I know of them previous to this was Stacy's mom, like that's what I went in expecting was some fun lyrics, and they had a lot of them in these songs. So I do have one fun fact on this album. If you look at the cover picture on this album, it's a little boy clutching a rabbit while doing like a superhero type pose. This album, that picture was used on 2 different albums that came out 2 weeks apart in this year. Of course, this album, and then also a UK band, the Flamingos. So kind of an odd situation. So they did switch up the album cover to go to the UK for this one from Fountains of Wayne.
All right. What about you, Rappy?
So this was a fun one to listen to. It really kind of put a name to a face. I recognized a lot of the songs, but I never realized who sang that or what band it was. So it connected a lot to me. So it was a fun listen, and this was a strong contender for me. So what I thought was new wasn't new.
Okay. All right. This is going up against Paul Westerberg, and his album Eventually came out this year on April 30th, 1996. This is another one that I can attribute a lot to Craig and Danica because I knew of the Replacements through you guys, and I knew who Paul Westerberg was, even though I didn't know a lot about the Replacements at that time. Danica did the Bring Home Let It Be when I was still in high school, so that's where I got introduced to that. Love Untold was the song played on Rev 105 that I knew and liked a lot. I think there's a lot of catchy songs in here. He's got a very gravelly voice that I think fits really well with a lot of songs. And the other thing that made me into this album is because this is coming not too long after the singles soundtrack where he had the songs Dyslexic Heart and Waiting for Somebody, which were just great, great pop songs. He was also on the Friends soundtrack, which I owned. He had a song on there too. Love Untold reached number 21 on the alternative charts as well. The reviews I found were pretty mid for this album. I guess maybe it was too accessible, and maybe that's why I liked it, because maybe they expected something a little bit more, Replacements like, but I don't know. The reviews did not care as much for this as I did. Let's reverse and start with Rappy again on this one.
Yeah, I think I got to kind of agree with the reviews. This one didn't pop off to me at all and didn't bring back a lot of memories. I kind of recognized some of it. It was just kind of something that was there, but I didn't have any pulls from this one, or nothing really jumped out at me.
All right. And this is one where I had put it on the shelf for a long time. And so the first time I listened to it was, again, for this in a long, long time. And that's where I really was surprised at how much I did remember and liked it. So I had a good memory from that. Gifford.
Well, again, I'm not familiar with Mr. Westerberg. So coming in completely blind to this, I mentioned Fountains of Wayne with lyrics. Paul does, I think, even a better job. For me, out of this pairing, Love Untold was the real standout for me across both of these albums. I think it's just a fun first date jitters song, so that's kind of fun to listen to. I love the line, checking on her face, checking his sleeve for his ace, just not really coming up with anything. We had Ain't Got Me, Give Me Tambourines, A Pair of Shaking Hips. Had some throwback to what sounded like 50s kind of music, so I really did enjoy that. Fun fact on this album, Our drummer is Josh Freeze, and he is
That's the Foo Fighters drummer now, right?
that's the Foo Fighters drummer as of
Wow.
2023.
Huh.
So
I
he
did
was
not
the
know
drummer
that.
on this album.
All right, you alternative guys.
Okay, this is in contrast to Fountains of Wayne that I thought I was going to love. I didn't think that this was going to hit me. And when I listened to this again, I was like, why, where's this been for the last, however many years for me listening to? I just thought there were so many great songs on here. The run of Century, Love Untold, Ain't Got Me. I love that song, Mama Daddy Did. Is that the name of that song?
Yeah, Mama Daddy did.
Mama Daddy Did, where he talks about the goddamn kids. And Trumpet Clip is such a weird song, but I love that one too. I loved this on a re-listen and just thought it was awesome.
All right, Craig.
This is one of my favorite albums of this year. Of course, I was a Replacements fan. I was a big fan of his first solo album, 14 Songs. All the songs have been mentioned except for the other song I had on here. Oh, there's two that I had on my list that haven't come up yet. Good Day, which is kind of a mellow, very mellow song, but it reminds me of somebody I used to know, and it was written for, actually, I believe it was for Bob Stinson, who was in the Replacements, and he passed away. And then Had It With You is another one of the, just a little bit off song, but I love that song.
Yeah, I like that one too.
To pile on to Gift's fun fact, Josh Freese did play drums on some of the tracks. The other drummer, because he had a lot of session musicians with him, but the other drummer, and one that I believe toured with him, because I did see this tour, is Michael Bland, who was the drummer for Prince and New Power Generation. And he's a drummer to me that when you hear it, you're like, damn, this guy's really good and very, he's very powerful. I have two more fun facts. The producer for this album was Brendan O'Brien, who produced Pearl Jam, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots, AC/DC, just a huge line of great artists that he produced. And also Lou Giordano, who doesn't make pizza, although it sounds like he should, but he also produced Sugar, which was one of my favorite bands of the 90s as well.
Yes.
So I just thought there was a lot of things going for this. And I went on allmusic.com, and 14 Songs has all these great reviews, and everybody just bashed this. And
that's what I saw.
The reviewers did, but then the fans were just like, listen to it again. I mean, give it more. So, but I also get that Westerberg is not, it's not Sheryl Crow. It's not somebody that's for everybody. So, but it's certainly for me. So it's one of my favorites.
All right. So you two are both picking Paul Westerberg, I'm guessing. I'm not surprised you're picking him. I'm surprised at how little you like Fountains of Wayne, but you're both picking him, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And Rappy, I believe you're picking Fountains of Wayne. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to save Gifford for last year. So I'm also picking Fountains of Wayne. It's so catchy. It got an 8.7 on my banger scale. I love the Paul Westerberg album all the way beginning to end. I had no skips, but I only had 4 bangers. I liked a lot of it, but it didn't have as many big songs to me. And so my scale was only a 5.6 on that compared to 8.7 for Fountains of Wayne. So I'm picking Fountains of Wayne. So Gifford, you're breaking the tie, and I'm not 100% sure which way you're going.
You're having the guy break a tie for 2 albums that he's never listened to before. That's interesting. My vote matters. That's what we're finding out.
You're part of the show, so yeah, every vote counts.
Yes. I'm going Westerberg.
Oh, I didn't expect that, actually.
Yeah. I like I said, I thought the lyrics were just better. The songs that I listened to, I just thought it was excellent. So I'm going that route.
All right. That's my first surprise. That's our first upset of the night right there. That's our first Cinderella into the second round as far as seeding goes, and just what I expected too. Okay. All right, we're about halfway through this bracket here, GIF. We're having a great time. We're having a lot of great memories, but it's taken a little longer than expected. So what do you say we cut this into a two-parter?
Yeah, I think this will be great. We're halfway through the first round, and we'll have something for you guys here the middle half of the week. A little extra PCY for your listening pleasure, where we can do the second half of the first round, and then after that, we get the bulk of the memories and information about each album out there, and then we'll vote off where we end up, and see who's going to be the number one album of these for 1996.
And if you've made it to the end of this one, you're not going to want to miss the second one. I'm not going to give away any details, but the second half is a lot more with the surprises. This is where the bracket starts to bust a little bit. So we want to whet your appetite. We'll probably put this out Thursday, and you're going to want to hear what happens. It's good.
For sure. Yeah.
So we'll see you.
Yeah, make sure to come back later this week for the second half of our album bracket.
Yeah, we'll see you then.
No one's here to comfort me. Sorry for what I have done. Sorry that your son is gone. 7 steps and it will be my last. Next time, tell me on my back. I turn and I look to you. I'm scared, but there's nothing I can do.